Good morning from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. President Obama reiterated this morning his mandate to raise taxes on the wealthy as part of a deal to avoid the so-called fiscal cliff. And former Democratic Congressman Jay Inslee has been elected governor of Washington State. Republican Ron McKenna conceded last night. Right now, I am joined by MSNBC contributor Goldie Taylor, also contributor to our sister website, thegrio.com. Avik Roy, former member of Mitt Romney's Healthcare Policy Advisory Group, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and author of The Apothecary, the Forbes blog on healthcare and entitlement reform. Ta-Nehisi Coates, a senior editor at The Atlantic Magazine, and Lorella Preelli, director of advocacy and policy at the United We Dream Network. She came to the United States as an undocumented immigrant when she was 10 years old. Late Tuesday night, Barack Obama was reelected to a second term as president of the United States. His victory was at the same time narrow and decisive. And it was not just a victory for the president, but a truly historic night for liberalism across the country. Colorado and Washington legalized recreational marijuana through ballot initiatives, and 3 states, Maine, Maryland, and Washington, approved gay marriage by popular vote for the first time ever. After Tuesday's election, the Affordable Care Act will be implemented. The 113th Congress will include the most female members ever, and for the first time in history, women and minorities will hold a majority of the Democratic Party's House seats. In his victory speech, President Obama vowed to continue the work he began in his first term.
America, I believe we can build on the progress we've made and continue to fight for new jobs and new opportunity and new security for the middle class. I believe we can keep the promise of our founding. The idea that if you're willing to work hard, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what you look like or where you love. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white or Hispanic or Asian or Native American or young or old or rich or poor, able, disabled, gay or straight. You can make it here in America if you're willing to try.
The president's second term will no doubt be fraught with much of the same obstruction and frustration of the past 4 years. But after Tuesday, Obama will have the opportunity to become one of the most celebrated presidents in history, one who may years from now be seen as ushering in a new era of liberal governance in America. And he will have that opportunity in no small part thanks to the work of his remarkable campaign. On Wednesday, a newly reelected President Obama stopped by the Obama for America's Chicago headquarters to express his gratitude.
Even before last night's results, I felt that the work that I had done in running for office had come full circle. Because what you guys have done means that the work that I'm doing is important. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of all of you. And
the Obama who inspired the world during the 2008 election, the man who was notably absent for much of the past campaign, reappeared over the past week. The real question now is whether he will stay. So Tuesday night, my big takeaways from Tuesday night in terms of what it meant and what the legacy is. A bunch of people have noted that the economic recovery seems to be picking up, and it seems like we may finally have the tires of the economy grip pavement and get going. And if that's the case, then that means that whoever was going to be the next president was likely going to inherit essentially a recovery. And that recovery was going to render a verdict on the previous 4 years. And I thought that it seemed very likely to me from a sort of historical legacy perspective that if Barack Obama did not get reelected, and there was a recovery, then there would be this kind of Carter comparison, which was that America tried liberal governance, it was a failure, it was in the doldrums, we had a recession, we never really got going, we elected Mitt Romney, and boom, 4 or 5% GDP growth, and this is what free markets and American conservatism can do. I think now, if there is a recovery, that recovery belongs to both Barack Obama and also, in sort of a historical sense, the liberal project, the Democratic Party, the policies he put in place. And I also think from a historical sense, it's funny to think that a few 100,000 votes or 1 million votes, if you kind of spread it out over the swing states, is the difference between a legacy that would have always towered in American history because of the historical nature of his presidency, but now I think will be one of the possibly one of the truly great presidencies. And I mean great in that kind of loaded way that all great presidencies are, which is complicated and and shot through with all sorts of, terrible stuff and amazing stuff. And then finally, and Ovik, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, because this is something that you've worked on, and obviously you were on the other side of this that evening. The Affordable Care Act is going to be implemented. And my feeling about this is that was a huge, when I went into the polls just as a voter, that was a big part of what my vote was on. Because, I think it's a flawed but good piece of legislation. I think it's an important step in American history. And what I like is that not just the human fact that 30 million people are going to get access to health insurance and 50 million added to the Medicaid rolls, but also the fact that we're going to just implement the thing and see if it works. Just from a basic kind of democratic perspective. If it's a disaster, well, then the Democrats are going to pay for it, and they should pay for it. It's their bill. They're going to pay for it politically. They're going to pay for it at the polls. And if it's really good, they're going to reap the gains. And that, to me, seems like the way that this should work.
Yeah, so, we were talking before the show about the fact that sometimes when policies fail, why they failed is not obvious to everyone, or the political case for why they failed isn't always made accurately. So we talk about the financial crisis. Why did the financial crisis happen? Some people say it was because there were greedy bankers running around screwing everybody else. Some people say that actually there were policy problems. There was problems with Fannie and Freddie. There was problems with monetary policy. There were problems with banking leverage, things like that. So if the Affordable Care Act fails, will Republicans be able to point out why it fails? For example, will it be because premiums are too high? Things about access. So there are problems right now with access to care if you're on Medicaid, but those problems didn't dissuade people from wanting to expand Medicaid, right? So if those problems continue, will people be successful, will Republicans be successful at painting the bright picture as to why they failed? I think that remains to be seen. So even if something fails, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a partisan victory for Republicans.
The other thing, too, I can't believe I'm about to help Ovik out here. Right? I think it's also probably harder to roll something back once it's in. So it might fail, but dismantling it, I think, will prove a lot harder once it's already in.
What were your thoughts? What were your big takeaways watching Tuesday night's election?
I think the question is even larger than whether or not we're going to have an economic recovery, because I think that's coming. I think we are going to grow, and whether it was a liberal or conservative in the White House, and who knows which one Mitt Romney was even to this day, but no matter who we had, there was going to be some sort of recovery, and who gets credit for that. What the real issue was for me on the ballot was who was going to have access to this economy, and how. And so women's reproductive rights was an issue, because that is about my economic destiny. Marriage equality was about economic parity, being able to enter into that marital state contract. And so I think a lot more things were on the ballot than simply more jobs, but who has access to wealth in this country, why and why not?
And that echoes, obviously, the themes in that speech, right, which is this vision of a very broadly inclusive America, right? Absolutely. That inclusion is the kind of thematic watchword, and what was on the ballot, right? Inclusive or narrow. I mean, obviously, I think people who are on the other side of this don't think that was the framing, but I think that was the way the victory was framed, certainly.
Well, yeah, and for me, that was, it's obviously, it's historic to elect a black president. There's an argument my colleague James Fallows made that it's even more historic to re-elect a black president. But I got to say, beyond that, marriage equality. This was if I say I will only fight you on my home field, and I'll only fight you by my rules, and then you come and you kick my, on that home field. Because frankly, I don't think marriage equality should be on about. I don't think, that should be up. But we were in a situation where that was the case, and we won. Yeah. And we won. We won 4 of them, and I think that's just huge, just absolutely gigantic.
Lorella.
So I think that this week there has been a tremendous amount of talk about the Latino vote and the impact that it had in this election, but I don't think there has been a lot of discussion about what made Latinos come out and vote in the ways that they did. And that was a lot of voter mobilization. It was watching civic action happen and the delivery. So forcing President Obama to deliver on something months before the election to this constituency made a tremendous difference.
You couldn't vote.
I could not.
And I'm just curious what that felt like on Election Day.
So even though we could not vote, United We Dream Network was very committed to making sure that our community was informed, educated, and that they made their vote, and that they pledged to vote with Dreamers in mind. And so we had a campaign going in key battleground states where we were knocking on doors and we were asking people to remember us on the day that they were going out to vote. And so while it was very frustrating to not, to be politically engaged in my country and not be able to go out and express who I want to run this country and to lead us, I think we had a tremendous amount of impact.
That brings up our next big topic, and this is, I think, one of the things that's just dominated the discussion after the election, which is the changing demographics of America, the changing faces of America, and the respective coalitions that have come together around Barack Obama and the Republican Party particularly. And I want to talk about why it's not the Latino vote that tells us the most about the Republican Party's future. My story of the week, right after this.